When the Thunderbolts come together on the big screen on May 2, it will be a ragtag team-up like we haven't seen since Guardians of the Galaxy. But unlike Gunn's team of unknowns, this team is full of somewhat familiar faces. Heroes and villains that have shown up across a variety of projects, from Captain America the Winter Soldier to Black Panther Wakanda Forever. But don't worry, we're here to catch you up on all of the basics in just a few minutes' time. Let's get started. The Thunderbolts are a team-up of Yelena Belova, played by Florence Pugh, Bucky Barnes, played by Sebastian Stan, the Red Guardian, played by David Harbour, Ava Starr, aka Ghost, played by Hannah Dominique E. John Kamen, John Walker, Wyatt Russell, and Taskmaster, played by Olga Kurylenko. 3 of these characters first appeared in Scarlett Johansson's long-awaited solo outing, Black Widow, and so let's start there. In the early 90s, Natasha Romanoff lived a seemingly normal life with her sister, mother, and father in Ohio. Keyword, seemingly. As we learned way back in the Avengers, Natasha began her career in espionage as a young girl.
They start that young?
I did.
Who are you?
Natasha Romanoff.
In fact, she never even knew her biological mother or father. Instead, she was placed in a quote-unquote family made up of other undercover Soviet/former Soviet agents who were really stationed in America to steal secrets from S.H.I.E.L.D. Natasha's father was actually Alexei Shostakov, aka the Red Guardian. Originally created as the Soviets' answer to Captain America, Alexei was given his own take on the super soldier serum. By the way, for a top-secret chemical compound, that thing sure does make the rounds. But his final official mission would not be a test of strength, but of stealth, posing as a mild-mannered American researcher with his wife, also undercover, and his 2 daughters, Natasha and Yelena. As the youngest, Yelena was the least involved in the mission and the most invested in the family comprised of her fellow agents. So when the family was forced to end their assignment early and flee the country, Yelena took it the hardest. Unfortunately, that was just the start of her troubles. Selected for the infamous Red Room, the super spy training program introduced way back in Avengers Age of Ultron, Yelena was robbed of her free will and trained as a deadly Black Widow assassin, just like Natasha, the Black Widow. But unlike Natasha, who was merely mentally conditioned as a child, Yelena was chemically controlled by the leader of the Red Room, Dreykov. For the next 20 years, Yelena is forced to carry out Dreykov's orders, always aware but unable to control her own actions. But in 2016, shortly after the events of Captain America Civil War, Yelena is freed from Dreykov's control, thanks to the sacrifice of a fellow widow and a CGI red mist antidote. That's when she manages to contact her long-lost superhero sister, Natasha. Quick aside here, depending on how many times you've rewatched The Avengers, the name Dreykov may be familiar to you.
Dreykov's daughter.
When Nat first met Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, he helped her cut ties with the Red Room by blowing up Dreykov's home with him in it. Unfortunately, there was no way to take Dreykov out without also taking out his young daughter. Though the seemingly successful hit allowed Natasha to join S.H.I.E.L.D., it continued to haunt her. So, in 2016, when Yelena informs her that Dreykov is still alive and chemically subjugating countless young women like herself, Natasha decides to finish what she started and help Yelena take down the Red Room once and for all. The 2 of them ultimately manage to do just that, but only after getting the family back together, starting with Alexei, the Red Guardian. It turns out that the last few decades haven't been kind to Alexei either. Having fallen from grace and been tossed aside by Dreykov, his one-time friend and ally, the Red Guardian is set to spend the rest of his days in a Russian prison. But when Natasha and Yelena stage a daring rescue, he jumps at the chance to suit up again. Alexei tells them where to find their super scientist, quote-unquote mom, Melina Vostokov, who, after some convincing, helps them find Dreykov's floating fortress. But it can't be too easy, right? There's still one more obstacle standing between them and Dreykov, and that obstacle just happens to be the 3rd member of the Thunderbolts, Taskmaster. Remember that part earlier about how Natasha killed Dreykov's daughter in an attempt to kill him and was forever haunted by it? Well, the good news is that she technically didn't kill Dreykov's daughter after all. The bad news is that she was so severely injured that she had to be rebuilt, making her, surprise surprise, an extra super assassin. With her quasi-computer brain, she's able to analyze and replicate any fight pattern, from Captain America to Black Panther. This is a nifty trick, and it makes her nearly impossible to take down. Luckily, Natasha and company don't have to. After a few close calls, they realize that Dreykov is controlling his own daughter using the same compound he had used to control Yelena, which means they're able to free her with the same antidote. After the Red Room is destroyed, along with Dreykov, she is finally freed along with the other widows. But how much of her humanity remains? That's just one of the questions we're expecting Thunderbolts to answer. At the end of Black Widow, things seem to be looking up for both Taskmaster, who is freed from a mental prison, and Red Guardian, who has been freed from an actual prison. But while the film's release seems like a lifetime ago, even more time has passed within the MCU. The last time we saw those characters, Tony Stark was alive and single, and hitting on Aunt May. Doctor Strange had never even heard of Kamar-Taj, and Everett Ross still thought Wakanda was a third world country.
A lot has happened today.
What about Yelena? What has she been doing since 2016? Well, hold your horses, we're getting there. There's another member of our team who's been laying low for quite a while. Ava Starr, aka Ghost. Like Red Guardian and Taskmaster, Ghost has shown up in only one Marvel movie to date. Introduced as a villain in 2018's Ant-Man and the Wasp, which also takes place in 2018, Ghost is another ex-SHIELD super spy. As a child, Ava was a victim of a tragic lab accident that killed her parents and transformed her physiology. The blast gave her the power to phase in and out of a solid state, meaning she can move through solid objects and vanish in plain sight. On the other hand, the condition is extremely painful and terminal. When SHIELD fails to deliver the promised cure, she goes rogue. Working with Hank Pym's old partner Bill Foster, another ex-SHIELD guy, she attempts to force Pym to harvest quantum energy for her, despite knowing that doing so could kill Hank's long-lost wife, Janet. Yeah, don't worry about it. Though Scott Lang, Ant-Man, and Hope Van Dyne, the Wasp, are able to stop Ghost, they still agree to help her out.
Healing particle secured for our new ghost friend.
Great.
In fact, that's why Scott is in the quantum realm in 2018, when a certain purple space tyrant snaps half of all life out of existence. Was Ghost dusted away along with the Pym family? Or was she left to fend for herself without access to the healing particles that only they could provide? We don't know. Yet.
Hey, seriously, don't joke around. Bring me up. Let's go. Guys!
So let's recap real quick. Red Guardian, Taskmaster, and Ghost were all last seen pre-blip. What about the rest of our team? Well, let's see. After taking down the Red Room, Yelena sets about freeing the rest of the widows stationed around the world. That's what she's doing in 2018 when she blinks out of existence. 5 years later, she reappears to discover a changed world, and one without Natasha. Bitter and grief-stricken, Yelena goes back to doing what she's best at, killing people. And that's how she meets Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, or Val for short, a shady CIA operative who hires Yelena to do her dirty work. But it gets personal when Val hires Yelena to take out Clint Barton, the man she blames for the death of her sister. It's your classic misunderstanding. After some rooftop antics and a memorable pot of macaroni, Yelena and Clint come to an understanding. Yelena leaves him be, and that's the last we see of her, for now. That just leaves us Bucky Barnes and John Walker, two guys that are defined by a complicated relationship with Captain America. Bucky Barnes was one of the first characters introduced in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, appearing way back in Captain America: The First Avenger. In short, Bucky is the best friend of Steve Rogers. Steve thought he watched Bucky die during a World War II mission against Hydra. But it turns out Bucky survived, only to be captured by Hydra and transformed into that's right, mind-controlled super soldier. With no memory of who he is or where he's from, Barnes spends the bulk of the 20th century as Hydra's secret weapon, the Winter Soldier. Only coming out of cryogenic stasis periodically to take down high-value targets, Barnes is a regular Paul Rudd. He's nearly 100 years old when Steve Rogers finally breaks him out of Hydra's control in 2014, but he doesn't look it. After a valiant last stand in Wakanda in Avengers Infinity War, Bucky is also snapped out of existence. When he returns, he helps the Avengers take down Thanos once and for all, before saying a final farewell to Steve. Now with a second lease on life, he spends his time helping Sam Wilson, the new Captain America, while also making amends for his past errors. Most recently, in Captain America: Brave New World, we found out that he's running for United States Congress. Talk about public service. And that's where we'll find Bucky when we see him in Thunderbolts. But that's not quite all of it. Speaking of the new Captain America, let's talk about John Walker. A highly decorated U.S. Army Ranger, Walker is chosen to be the next Cap after Steve Rogers exits the scene. But while Walker is an impressive physical specimen, he's still just a guy. In a world of super people, Walker grows increasingly insecure about his ability to live up to the Captain America name.
They weren't even super soldier.
So when he's presented with the opportunity to take a recreated super soldier serum, he seizes it. Unfortunately, while the new serum gives Walker strength like Steve Rogers, it also leaves him mentally imbalanced. In trying to do the right thing, he makes some pretty public mistakes, like chopping a guy's head off with the Captain America shield. Yeah, not a good look. Stripped of his duties and dishonorably discharged, Walker is left with nothing until he meets Val. Yep, the same Val that hired Yelena to kill Hawkeye. She's pulling all kinds of strings, sensing Walker's desperation and knowing that a super soldier is a terrible thing to waste. Val hooks him up with a new suit and title.
A U.S. agent.
And that's where we saw him last. You can see where this is going, right? All of our Thunderbolts are messy people with messy pasts. They've tried to do right to varying degrees, but they've all made some pretty big missteps and killed a lot of people. And it seems like that's by design. We've talked about her a few times now, but who is Val anyway? Well, we don't know that much. Following the blip, she seems to have risen in the ranks of the US government. The last time we saw her, in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, she was serving as a CIA director and arresting Everett Ross, who also happens to be her ex-husband, for assisting the Wakandans behind her back. Now, she's managed to purchase the old Avengers Tower, and it seems like that's only the start of her plans. Why is she bringing a new team together? Is she looking to redeem these troubled would-be heroes, or just use them for her own ends? And who is the Sentry, and what does she want with him? Find out all of this and more when Thunderbolts hits the theaters in early May. And then be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel for all of your MCU needs. We'll see ya.